Andy, I really don't know if you have felt this way, but I've gained probably 20 pounds in the last 3 weeks. I just can't stop eating, side swiping, doing whatever when there's cookies, cakes, pies, any sort of candy canes. I'm a sucker for this, and I know I'm gonna regret it. I know I'm still staying on my exercise routines, but it doesn't go when you've
Doesn't make
got
it
all
easier.
those mounds.
Yeah, I'm a glutton, Dave. I have to not have things around to not consume them, right? If my
That's me.
sweet wife makes cookies or brownies, or if we buy ice cream or if pot, like I swallow it. So like, fortunately, we don't buy as much of it, as we used to, and she doesn't make as much because my kids don't eat as much, and it's just so not having it around helps, but what is around gets swallowed. So
Yeah,
I can empathize. I can empathize.
I'm the same way. I look at it and I say it's my responsibility to get this food out of my house as fast as possible. And the only way to do that is for me to consume it.
That's
So
right.
then I won't have it in my house anymore. But in that process, I've gained 15 pounds probably.
But you still look great, Dave, and that's the important thing. You still
Well, and that's what I'm here for, Andy, is for you and our 15,000 other followers and listeners who are just plugging away. That's my goal, Andy, at least 15,000. We are on YouTube. We are out there on all the major podcast channels. So we hope you are listening and we hope to hear you from you. We do have an email account, men of a certain X at Gmail. We have a men of a certain X a YouTube channel. So please check us out there. You can see some video clips of this. But Andy, for Friday, I think I may unofficially dub this particular Friday as Rant Friday
all right.
because we have a couple rants we want to go on today. So I just thought of that as we were talking pre-show here. But Rant Friday is what it is. But Andy, on Wednesday we had a lot of politics discussions. Of course, the Colorado Supreme Court ruling about Trump being off the ballot due to the 14th Amendment, Section 3 clause. There's been some fallout as we expected. Andy, do you want to take some notes from there?
We can, yeah, for sure. And then I was saying random thoughts as you were starting to that are completely unrelated, but we'll come back to maybe later. So
Yeah.
yes, so Wednesday was a full one because there's just so much going on in the political landscape, and it's hard to not talk about the election in 2024, which is annoying, to be honest. But just from that, Dave, we've seen just how crazy both political parties are. Several other states have now seen Colorado's decision, and Minnesota, I think, already tried, but Michigan, I think California, are looking now. Can we potentially put Mr. Trump off the ballot, in our states? And from the Republican corners, they're saying, "Hey, you guys did this to Trump. Well, maybe we should do this to Joe Biden in Texas, right?" And not really a serious threat, I don't think, but just the fact that now we're tossing around the idea of deliberately keeping candidates off the ballot as part of the election process. That's not gamesmanship. It's in the interest of the United States, of the American people. It's just crazy, and they do it instantly. Jumping to these things. So that's a real frustration, I think, for the political dynamic, just to deny potentially candidates, the ability to be on the ballot. Now, again, in Mr. Trump's case, there's there's grounds in which to argue that, and for those who just think, oh, just liberal Colorado made this decision, this was a very deliberate ruling, and you can read the ruling and the rationale. You can disagree with it, but it wasn't like insane with the decision. There's a good basis for it, but when you this follow-on politicization of it is just ugly to see, Dave. I think. What do you think?
Well, to the Colorado thing, that wasn't brought up by Democrats, by the way. I mean, that was brought up by Republicans. Is four Republicans and two independents. I mean, so if you want to cast stones, look at what's the old saying? Cast stones. Be sure you don't live in a glass house or whatever. But
Yeah,
whatever that is, Andy, I kind of attribute a lot of this political maneuvering, if you want to call it. Maneuvering seems like it's actually like real smart people doing it,
yeah,
but I actually think they're idiots. And so I attribute or connect a lot of this to like Florida State missing out on the college football playoff,
yeah.
and all of a sudden they're threatening lawsuits and going, going to go pull money from the NCAA. They're going to do all of this other stuff. Hey, look, you don't have to agree with it, and there is a process. Trump has a process now to get back on the ballot. That we have a Colorado State Supreme Court. It goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they'll make a decision. I mean, I don't know what we're all getting feisty about, but you hit on another topic, and this is also on our like agenda for today. Is even within the Democratic Party, they're not listing people on the ballot.
Yeah.
That you have Joe Biden and you have two other candidates that are out there, and in some of the states now, they're contemplating just putting Joe Biden on the thing. Well, that's not a fair election process. We
Yeah.
have a primary for a reason. Just because he's the incumbent doesn't mean he gets the automatic go to the convention. So I think this is I don't we've just politicized every little thing about decisions, and there are due processes. That's what our country is based around. Follow the due process. That I don't know, Andy.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I can go back to that last point you're making, I mean, the ballot access one, in this case, the Republican Party in Massachusetts is keeping Marianne Williamson off the ballot, right? And she's been running. This is her second time running for president. She's been running the whole time, as a Democrat. And this isn't unique to the Democratic Party. The Republicans did this when Mr. Trump was running for re-election and when put Mr. Trump's name on the ballot. It's just so ugly, right? I mean, we spent a lot of time bashing Trump because he's an idiot, but in Biden's case with the Democrats, it's just as ugly to do that, right? There's so much fear and concern about him being threatened from his own party, and so to block out candidates, not giving voters a chance to express their desire either for that candidate or just not for the one that the party is supporting is really taking away voice of the people. That should be looked at harshly as well, right? I mean, it's really unfair to the citizenship. It's unfair to those trying to express their dissatisfaction with candidates. It's
Right.
unfortunate to see that, right? Regardless of what you think of Ms. Williamson's campaign. And again, this doesn't only happen at the federal level. At the state level, the Republican and Democratic parties put a lot of effort together into blocking out, independent parties, third party candidates from getting on those same state and local ballots to protect their own interests, where they fight like, rabid dogs at the national level and at the state level too. They work together to limit options for voters, at state and local elections. And it's really hard to be a third party at the national election, even though, RFK is getting some momentum. He might not be on the ballot in all 50 states. The No Labels movement might not be on the ballot in all 50 states. And it just shows, how messy our political system can be, not because it's a bad system, but because of the corrupt nature of the two-party political system. And hey, Joe Biden and Democrats can be just as disgustingly ugly as Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think the great fallacy in the whole world is that we dare tell other countries that they need to avoid corruption and they need to get that out of their government and systems in order to be a great system. And yet here we are. I mean, we are just as corrupt as some of these other countries. And look, it's not an overstatement. I mean, it's a simple fact. I mean, you have lobbyists. Their design is to pay for access to get access to politicians for their benefit. That's no different than in many other countries that we accuse of being corrupt. Except we just don't want to look within on that. To your point, though, Andy, I think it's really important at the state and local level. Everyone gets so fixated on what happens in the national election, obviously, because it's important, right? You're going to make the laws and and the rules and all that other stuff at the national level. But a lot of the things that get to that national level come through the state and local governments
Yeah.
and come through the processes that are at the state and local level. And that's where, if a lot of people want to say, how have Republicans made so much headway despite not having the presidency or like control the Congress, it's because they've done really well at the state and local level, governors
Yeah.
and stuff, and they control a lot of that stuff. Because those individuals appoint judges, right? They get to the part where they can do a lot of these rulings and activities, and you overlook it. So I do think that that's a little thing there. I want to also, Andy, on this part is like talk to everyone gets so fixated too on, well, we're going to do this to you, we're going to do that, and it's Joe Biden's FBI, it's Joe Biden's Justice Department, and I don't think people understand how insane that statement is. The fact that a president or a Congress could weaponize a government institution. Yes, there are a degree of political appointees there, and they do are responsible for making decisions and setting guidance. But you have thousands upon thousands of government employees, many of who, like these government institutions are not well-run mechanisms. They're not great at efficiencies. They're tied up in bureaucratic red tape. To
Yeah.
think that all of a sudden we're going to start targeting people and doing this and that because of a ruling in some state or local area, I'm sorry, go work a day in government. I mean,
Yes.
it just doesn't work that way. It's impossible for it to work that way, and in fact, I would argue that's why we don't get a lot of things done. And look, I don't particularly care for President Biden. I don't like many of his policies, but here is a guy who passed a massive infrastructure bill that now everybody is trying to take credit for on both
Yeah.
sides of the aisle, and he's been able to get things done. But to say now all of a sudden he's weaponized the FBI to target Trump, he's weaponized the Justice Department to go after cronies and all, and the J6 people. Hey, look, let's those J6 people, they attacked, I don't care what you say, they attacked the Congress, and they have every right to go after those. And guess what? Everybody has a right to be fired as a result of that from their jobs, whether the federal government pursues them or not. I'm sorry, Andy, I'm ranting. Let me pull it back in. Where are you? What do you think here?
No, you're right. I mean, again, one, the nonsense absurdity that comes out of politicians' mouths, Trump referring to the January 6th convictions as hostages. Like,
Yeah.
come on, man, like that kind of language, that kind of rhetoric it's just so unproductive, except to seed chaos and more violence. And we'll come back to the point of violence in a minute and maybe close this up, with Colorado again. But to your point, Dave, you're right. I mean, government organizations, and this isn't even a fault of any leader. It's just they're massive, clunky, inefficient organizations because of how big and massive they are. And those processes are huge. You can't hide a conspiracy in government agency. There's people of every political opinion, every belief, every faith working in those organizations. There's no massive conspiracy that can successfully come out of them for sure. And, the other thing I think Americans don't typically see is how little gets done, largely because of the political process. When you're threatening government shutdowns every 2 months, that causes all sorts of activity that is completely useless activity within those halls of government, because they have to prepare for potential shutdown, which has massive implications across government operations for people. And so even less gets done. And that's purely a function of an inefficient Congress not being able to do anything productive. I think the study just came out. We didn't get into it, I don't think, but this current Congress is the least productive Congress like ever. Like they've done nothing except for sit on Fox News and MSNBC and get their media time. They don't actually do anything productive in the interest of the American people. And these threats of government shutdown only further slow down the efficiency of that bureaucracy they're describing that isn't hiding secret conspiracies. FBI Director Wray, nominated by Donald Trump, is not out to get the Republican Party. It's just chaotic rhetoric, that's just hurting our country so much. If we could go on forever, we probably
Yeah.
need to wrap that one up. But maybe we can discuss that Colorado item one more time.
Yeah. Let's go to back to the Colorado part, because again, the justices did, the Supreme Court justices in Colorado did vote 4-3 to keep him off the ballot for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now the blowback, right? So now there are threats. So you talked about this a little bit on Wednesday, Andy. You were concerned about some of the things that would potentially evolve out of this process. Now we're starting to receive threats from here. This is unhealthy. This is the concern. This is where people start losing their mind. Andy, where are you thinking on that?
Yeah, I mean, we said this was going to happen, and it certainly is happening. It's frustrating when you know there's a punch coming to your face and you do nothing about it, and then you get punched in the face. And I feel like that's our political environment. That's our violent environment right now. So yeah, after this decision came out, just a quote from NBC News, they identify a pro-Trump forum where one of the participants in that forum is quoted as saying, in reference to the decision in Colorado, "This ends when we kill these effers." Right? He had more colorful than effer, but that's just an example of just one of the many comments that get made, and that one or two individuals pick up and take for action. Right?
Yeah.
And so when Mr. Trump and other Republicans and other Democrats are just as guilty, well, maybe not just as guilty, but also guilty of using, strong, violent language at times to excite individuals. It's really a dangerous game. And when you see people saying things like this, like we knew this was going to happen, but again, some people will take these things for action. They will seek out. And again, we just had again last week. We mentioned this on the last podcast. An individual, they got arrested for threatening, to harm the FBI. We've had people rush the White House. We've had people, make threats to other Republican candidates that we just recently discussed. So it's really ugly to see. But again, when we've got politicians on their soapboxes, nobody more so than Donald Trump right now, you know, exciting people towards violence. And that's exactly what they're doing, just like you did excite them to violence on January 6th. It's such a selfish, dangerous game to play. And unfortunately, our country has never seen more of it, I don't think, than we do right now. It's really a sad thing to see.
Yeah, I think you hit on the really great point. It's not for the 99% of the country is not going to be thinking much of this, and they go to bed and sleep peacefully. There's a portion of the country though that is fixated, and it's Colorado today, but it could be just as easy another event tomorrow on all sides of the aisle. They'll decide that they've had enough, and they're going to take action, and they just allow this rhetoric. And again, the politicians who speak up on these platforms, they don't think anything of it. They're just trying to get points. They're trying to get people to go to the polls for them. They don't think they're not necessarily saying, oh, this guy's going to pick up a weapon, but somebody is going to pick up a weapon. Somebody is going to do something. Somebody is going to go into Nancy Pelosi's house, break into it, and assault
Right.
the spouse. These things do happen, and we've seen it happen. And for politicians to continue to feed into that for a talking point or for Fox News airtime, I think until we start punishing those individuals, or restricting or penalizing the individuals who allow these things to get airtime, then I think we're in a bad shape. So I don't know, Andy, anything else you want to add on to this? Because I've got another rant I want to go on to.
No, we could probably, I mean, there's something we could talk about there probably as far as, who's responsible and how, but we'll say that for another day, Dave. So should I transition us? We're ready to move off our political discussion here today.
Let's move to the transition, Andy.
All right, let's do it. Can I just say, Dave, as you were finishing up, the last segment, I was stretching. Before we started the podcast, I was stretching. You ever have a stretch that's so good? I was stretching so well to the point where I almost fell over right here standing at my desk this morning because I was stretching so intensely. Have you ever collapsed stretching before? Like I was thrown off by this a little bit.
I have not, Andy, but I have gotten into stretching a little bit more. Just in my older age, I just realized that sometimes lifting weights may not be as what I need. It could be just stretching,
Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure I've ever gotten to that point, Andy.
Yeah, well, it was a dangerous moment here. So I stand here right in front of a window, and if I fall backwards too aggressively, it's a 20-foot plunge to the cement. So fortunately, Dave, all is well, all is well. The intensity of my stretch, it's all right. It's okay. But sorry, you went to go somewhere else besides my morning calisthenics.
Oh, that's okay, Andy. That's very fun. Maybe we'll clip that as a short and we can put that on our video shorts. Andy, I do want to talk about one other thing. This is not political. This is all sports, but maybe it is politics as well. But Andy, for years,
Yeah,
college athletes were granted scholarships to play sports at their respective schools. And those schools then benefited off of their name, image, and likeness. They
yeah,
would sell jerseys with the numbers on it, and then maybe they wouldn't necessarily put the name on the back of the jersey, but everybody knew that
yeah.
certain numbers reflected certain athletes at certain schools. You just kind of you always knew that part. Well, years ago, I think we're almost 4 or 5 years ago, there was a court ruling that gave the rights back to the students, the student athletes. So it was the NIL, name, image, and likeness. And now, uh, effectively, student athletes can benefit off of that. Now, what that basically means is that schools can freely pay these individuals as much as they want to. And in fact, we've seen now starting to see a lot of the numbers come in. In fact, here's an example. Brock Purdy, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, the best team by far in the NFL, according to our Power 5 rankings, Andy.
Right, that's right.
and just about everybody else makes 800 and some odd $1,000 a year. Very good salary for a starting quarterback who was picked last in the entire draft, the very last, the Mr. Irrelevant.
Yep.
Compare that to Archie Manning, Arch Manning, whatever you want to call him, the heir to the Manning throne. He's the backup quarterback. I mean, he may even be the third string quarterback at the University of Texas. Andy, would you venture to guess what he's making as the third string quarterback at the University of Texas?
Dave, I have no idea, but shock me with the number.
It's over $2 million, Andy.
Yeah.
Over $2 million to be the back, only so that he can go to that school. And maybe next year he may play, but Andy, maybe not, maybe not.
Yeah.
But these schools have now created, in addition to just, hey, look, you have, you get your scholarship, you get all that stuff paid for. But now and look, students are paying tuition who may to help fund the sports programs. Well, now because they need all this bucket of cash to pay these quarterbacks in other players, they now create these NIL funds.
Yeah.
And so basically what it is just a bucket of money that they can pay whoever they want. And so each school now, each major school has a consortium of some sort of cash to pay. Why that is important is because now the manipulators, the exploiters, the agents have come in and swooped in. And so they see the value here. So in the transfer portal now, so now you can freely transfer to schools. You go into a portal and coaches can say, hey, who's in there? Who's not? There's a record number of people in the transfer portal, including starting quarterbacks at premier schools. So the starting quarterback at Ohio State University, who led them to what would otherwise be considered a very successful season. They were in the top 10. They lost one game to Michigan that they could have potentially won, and he threw an interception at the end. They lost one game this year, and he's in the transfer portal. Now, was he a great quarterback? No, but maybe it's because he could get more money somewhere else. Is probably what the challenge is. And so you now here are starting to see on social media also athletic directors and coaches coming up and talking about how agents are directly contacting them to say, hey, would you be interested in any of these players? In fact, there's a great clip out there, and maybe I'll send it out to everybody, about the Penn State staff was talking about, hey, an agent approached them about 8 players that they might be interested, one of which was their own player. And oh, by the way, that person was not in the transfer portal. So basically, the agent is saying, hey, this person is happy at their school, but if the money is right, he may be interested in coming to your school, Andy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is bad for college sports. They need to get some regulation here. And as much as I agree that the student athletes need to benefit from their name, image, likeness, there's a lot of ways you can do it without a fucking free-for-all where you hand a bucket of cash to the third string quarterback because his last name is Manning. And look, Arch Manning may be very good, but history tells us, Andy, that these quarterbacks who are supposed to be very great in high school and in college don't actually wind up being shit in the pros. Brock Purdy, a great example, a good quarterback in college, the last quarterback picked in a very quarterback heavy draft. And he's the one, not the one who you're paying millions of dollars to. Andy, this is a fucking farce. And I'm sorry, I'm sick of it now. But Andy, that's where I'm going with NIL. I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah, Dave, I appreciate the passion. I mean, I really, it's intense, and I appreciate it. I think, a lot of points there to get into, which I won't get into in depth, but I'll say one, Brock Purdy, he's making plenty of money. He's overrated. He's playing on the best team in the NFL right now, and so I have no sympathy for Brock Purdy. Enjoy the ride, buddy. You're surfing on top of a great team, right? Yeah, so he's fine. Yeah, and then I think we touched on this once before, where I agree and I disagree at the same time. I agree with the idea that if you can make money, and players can make money. I think it's fair they get compensated for what they're helping those schools do and raising tons of cash. So I don't have an issue with that. But like you said, you've got to put some guardrails on the process, right? And the schools, the universities, they should find a way to do it in a reasonable manner. But at the same time, who's just as guilty is the parents and boosters, right? Because I mean, we get calls for contributing NIL for my kids' colleges, and I'll be honest, I'm not paying it, right? I'm already paying you plenty in tuition and boarding. I don't need to pay for your college athletics program. That's you figure that out. You know what I mean? Like that's a lot. And so, there's ways to manage it sort of by what we do, right? So take those $50 or $100 donate to your school's NIL, go give it some good charity cause, go feed the hungry instead, right? The football team doesn't need more money in that sense. So I think there's sort of a responsible behavior kind of thing. I don't know that we need to turn it off and then, like, if that's really what people want to do, but it does create an ugly system. I don't like seeing that moving. And you're right. I mean, players commit to a college. They intend that they're there for their college career, contributing to that school, getting an education. Most of them aren't going to get past that college level. Stay there and do that. But it's a tricky thing to figure out. But it is a funny story with Penn State. If you have them come with their own player at them, that's kind of shows that system's a little bit goofy right now.
Yeah, look, I'm not about being overly regulated. That's what I've hated about the NCAA. They regulate slices of pizza and all this other stuff in the name of competitiveness and fairness. The transfer portal before was a joke where you'd have to apply for a transfer and maybe you could play next year and maybe you couldn't. The NCAA decided that was a joke as well. But there just needs to be some sort of guidelines around this. And I agree with you. Look, I get that all the time from South Carolina, from Virginia Tech. I get it all the time. Look, I just choose not to pay it. I already pay enough in
Yeah.
tuition, especially being an out of stater. I play plenty in tuition. I'm not going to pay for you figure that out. The reason tuition is high is because of the sports department. It's not because they're funding the new biology lab. I'm just sorry. That's
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening. And so, and so with that, I just think that you really need to have some guidelines. I think the NCAA should be blown up though, and you reset it. There was an interesting proposal, and I know I do want to wrap up though, Andy. There was an interesting proposal. Maybe we can get into this later. But Chip Kelly, the head coach of UCLA, who is moving now from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, which now has 16 teams. Actually, it'll have 18 teams, I think, next year. But he was talking about, hey, why are we even doing this charade anymore? Let's just put 64 teams in a one conference and say you're the best 64 teams,
Yeah.
and you guys all play each other, and whoever comes out at the end comes out at the end. But to argue this whole thing about everything is being driven by football because the softball player at UCLA they're really great at softball doesn't want to fly to Rutgers to
Yeah.
play a conference game. Let's be smart about this. Let's blow it up. Everything is being driven by football, and so maybe that's a topic for next week or later, Andy. But I do want to move. Let's just wrap that up, Andy. And anything else you want to say on there?
No, I'll come back to that college idea at some point, but not today, Dave. Another
Yeah,
day. Another day.
yeah. All right, so we're at the end here, Andy. I do want to note for listeners, our schedule for next week is still in flux. We may be here, we may not be. It is the holidays. Andy and I do want to take some time with our families and such. Obviously, we won't be potting on Christmas Day, and then we got some other challenges the rest of the week. But we may be on. But please do catch up on the previous episodes of our podcast. We'll probably put out some links to some of our funner episodes, but we do encourage you to do that. Andy, wrapping up the week, anything you want to say to our listeners?
No, Dave, I appreciate the rants and raging this morning. It's fun to listen to you and to those listening. Merry Christmas to those that are celebrating Christmas. Happy holidays to everyone, and looking forward to coming back and sharing more next week, and then getting into 2024. Dave, we're on the cusp of 2024. Exciting times. For some reason, even numbered years are just better than odd numbered years. So looking forward to getting into the four there, the quattro.
I always enjoyed even over odd, anyways, Andy. I always was a big fan of that. So, all right, Andy. Well, happy holidays to everyone. And if you celebrate, Merry Christmas to you all and a Happy New Year. And we look forward to catching up with you. If we do next week, great. Otherwise, it'll be in 2024. But thanks for listening. And we will catch you next time, Andy.